Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we have plenty of football to talk about today. We've got news to talk about, we've got football tomorrow to talk about, and I'm going to spend the end of the show discussing some of the best fantasy football values to be found at every position. So make sure you stay tuned for the entire episode when we can talk about those. So, without further ado, let's sit back, let's relax, let's sip our coffee, and let's enjoy today's show. First things first for today, I want to welcome everyone in. Thank you for tuning in on the Instagram. Thank you for tuning in on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. It is great to see you guys this morning. I hope we can have a great show. We're going to start things off with a tweet that I saw, and this is Bill Barnwell on Twitter. He tweeted out from 2002 to 2021, about 1 in 3 teams who finished with 10 or more wins posted a losing record the following season. History suggests that 3 of the 9 teams from last year that finished with 10 or more wins will finish below 500 in 2023. Those teams are the Bills, the Bengals, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Chargers, Cowboys, Eagles, Vikings, and 49ers. With history suggesting 3 of those teams should be below 500, I honestly can't pick 3 of them. I think the Vikings would be a clear choice here, given the way that they're attacking this season, given that they won so many of their games last year by 1 score. So maybe that's one. But the other teams on this list, I feel like would take some injuries. Like the Ravens or 49ers maybe would be the other 2 teams that I think have a little bit of a question mark behind them in terms of quarterback play, in terms of offensive coordinators, in terms of health. So we'll see how that goes. I'm excited to see, what happens this season. And if anything works out in Bill Barnwell's tweet, if we do have some teams that were really good last year, actually suck this year, it'd be cool to see. But some actual news to talk about, and this is a sad story based on yesterday. Travis Kelce hyperextended his knee in practice and is uncertain for tomorrow night's game. We were all excited to finally see Travis Kelce back in action. It's looking like we probably won't see it. There's been tons of speculation as to what the injury actually is. It came out this morning that it is a bone bruise on his knee. So essentially what happened is, from what I read, is that basically he did everything you should have done to tear your ACL without tearing his ACL. Basically, he hyperextended his knees and his 2 knee bones collided into each other, causing a bruise, but his ligaments actually stayed intact. So he did avoid the worst case scenario, of course, but a bone bruise is extremely painful, and there's no clear timetable for this thing. Essentially, I saw a timetable. It could take anywhere from 3 weeks to 2 years before the pain really goes away for Mr. Kelce here. Hopefully it's on the shorter end. What we know, though, is that Travis Kelce is going to play through pain, and also the NFL lets players take toward all shots. And so if he is pained, I'm sure, he'll probably sit out week 1 based on what we're reading, right? Is that Travis Kelce probably won't be playing tomorrow night, but I'm sure he'll be out there week 2, popped up on painkillers, ready to play some football. And it's just going to be a matter of pain management throughout the entire season. That's not what you want to hear for everyone that drafted Travis Kelce in the first round, I know, but that's just how it is. And unfortunately, you're just going to have to hope that he doesn't fall off the cliff. However, guys, you have to expect that to happen. The whole risk in Travis Kelce was the fact that, yes, he's the best tight end by far, but there is still so much risk in drafting him given his age. And unfortunately here, it looks like the age and the health concerns might be a little bit of an issue all season. Hopefully it's not. We'll have to see how it develops. And I'll keep you guys informed as we learn more. At this point in time, go ahead and roster Noah Gray. See what can happen with him in week 1 if he actually does get some Travis Kelce type usage. If he can get himself 6 targets, that's going to be extremely valuable. So I do think Noah Gray is worth rostering and maybe throwing in on some DFS lineups tomorrow for sure. But let's talk about some other news, and that is that the Falcons depth chart came out. I'm showing it here. For some reason, Jake Matthews' name looks really weird. But I want you guys to look at it for a few seconds and then tell me what's weird about it. All right. Well, what's weird about it is the fact that there are actually 12 starters listed on this depth chart. Daryl Patterson is the 12th player added on here, and he is simply listed as the J. As we talked about when I went to the Falcons open practice, I saw Daryl Patterson a lot lined up in the slot, not motioned out of the backfield and then to go out wide, but to actually line up as a wide receiver. He was doing that all over practice. And so I think that that's what this J means. We look into it and you see Daryl Patterson changed his Twitter profile picture to a picture of the Heath Ledger Joker. So it probably means that Daryl Patterson is going to be used in all sorts of ways. To see him make the starting roster as a number 12 does definitely lend me to believe that he's going to be used a ton this season, is an extreme value. If he's available, you might as well pick him up. He's been hyper efficient the past 2 years in Atlanta. I think the offense is going to be really good. And when you have an actual role designed just for you, that can only mean good things in terms of production. So go get yourself some core Daryl Patterson. I finally got to say it with reasonable takes, right? I've been saying it all off season. I love myself some Cordero, but now I actually have a reason to say it. Actually, something tangible to tell you why you need to pick up Cordell Patterson instead of me just saying it. So I love the new depth chart. Excited to see what the Falcons can do here, and we'll talk a little bit about them more as I talk about values at each position. And the last bit of news, for actually two more pieces of news. First is that I have a quote from Jahan Dotson on Sam Howell. Jahan Dotson said, "I'm 100% on the Sam Howell bandwagon. He's a silent killer. He never looks phased. It's crazy." Sam Howell, commanding himself well heading into this season as the starting quarterback, has won over second-year wide receiver Jahan Dotson. Excited to see that connection blossom. Excited to see what the enemy has done with the Commanders, and definitely excited to see what Sam Howell can do, as he is a value, a cheap quarterback, definitely worth rostering in Superflex leagues. And, you know, the sky's the limit, right? I mean, Terry McLaurin's a good receiver. Jahan Dotson's been a really good receiver. Antonio Gibson is a great receiving running back. Curtis Samuel's a fun little gadget player. And you've got the great offensive coordinator with the enemy. So it'll be cool to see what he can do. And hopefully it's something good. And the last bit of news we have for you today is that the Raiders restructured Jimmy Garoppolo's contract to free up $17 million in cap space this season. That is a ton of money to clear up. That puts them about $10 million in spending money under the cap. And we'll see what they use it on. You know, obviously, when you see cap space being cleared, you think that, oh, they're immediately going to make a move. I think that this could be a number of things with the Raiders. If they are making an immediate move, I would see it more being on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe go ahead and go after like the Bosa or maybe even Chris Jones, see what you can do and bring them in with that money. Probably not enough. Maybe for Chris Jones. Probably not enough for Bosa, though. And then maybe it's one of these running backs, since they have the concern with Josh Jacobs. But I think it's more of an in-season insurance policy to have $10 million to spend in case something goes wrong. I don't think that there's an immediate need they're trying to tackle here with this money. I think they just want to have some money in case they need to spend it. Just a little bit of a savings account, if you will, with this move. All right, guys. We are done talking about the news. It's going to be time to talk about some values at each position. But first, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Bettle.
Oh, I see it every day online, every single day. Hey, that looks like a great fantasy team in an 8-team league. Oh, wish I could be in a league with you, right? Well, guess what? Now you can respond with, sure, let's play on Bettle. That's the beauty of this platform. This new Bettle platform standardizes all position scoring. So you just load your team and you challenge your friend, your colleague, Twitter troll, and you can browse other teams and issue challenges. Bettle is revolutionizing fantasy football. And with code UNDERWORLD, you get a $100 instant deposit match plus a free $10. So even if you deposit $20, you get $50. Think about that. So go to Bettle.com. The code is UNDERWORLD. Bettle.com. The code is UNDERWORLD. Or click a link in the description. It's fun to be right.
All right, guys. So now it's time to talk about values defined at each position for 2023. And I do want to say for quarterback, running back, and wide receiver, I actually have two options for you that I think I just couldn't really decide between the two. I think that there is some upside in a lot of these players. And before we get into it completely, some more kind of outlines of how I chose these is one, they needed to have an ADP outside of the top 100. And this was taken from Fantasy Pros full PPR top 100 rankings or ADPs. So you can go check that out for some more player values. But outside of the top 100. And then also I wanted them to have a lot of upside, like to actually be players that you will definitely be starting every single week. And that's kind of what I was looking for. I think there's a ton of value in this range. If you're looking for some floor players, like, yeah, you could go get Hunter Renfrow. I love Hunter Renfrow, for example. But, I think he's more of a floor play unless some injuries happen. And so I don't think that's really it. We're shooting for the stars here with these values. Let's go ahead and do it. We're going to start with Kyler Murray. And, we're going to start with quarterbacks, and we're going to start with Kyler Murray. And this is more in single quarterback leagues or Superflex really as well if you decide to do it. But if you have an IR space, especially in redraft leagues, I don't understand why you wouldn't take a chance on Kyler Murray. With him being named a captain, I think that does show that he will be playing football this year. He's been top 8 in points per game the last 3 seasons. Last season, he was hyper efficient as well, second in accuracy and completion percentage, as well as top 5 in completion percentage versus both man and zone. And we know what he can do on the ground, basically top 10 in all advanced rushing stats. So I think that Kyler Murray, when active, will be a fantastic producer for your fantasy team. And all it costs is a late round pick and an IR stash until he does return. So I think you should be getting Kyler Murray and just see what happens. It's really basically free for the type of upside that he will be bringing you when he does return from his injury. But if you don't like the Kyler Murray option, the second quarterback that I think you could take and maybe even pair with Kyler Murray if you like is, of course, Falcons quarterback Desmond Ritter. You could say the same thing for Taylor Heineke if you decided to go this route, but essentially Falcons quarterback is who I think will be a fantastic option at quarterback in Superflex leagues and maybe even single QB if you want to get really risky. If you say get Kyler Murray for your IR, you could pair him with Desmond Ritter for the beginning of the season and see what happens. Firstly, I'm saying this because it's a play on the weapons on the Falcons. He's throwing the ball to Drake London, throwing the ball to Kyle Pitts, throwing the ball to Bijan Robinson. We just talked about Daryl Patterson. Mac Hollins looks great this offseason, as well as it's a top 5 offensive line within the league. Everything is working in Desmond Ritter's favor for him to be a high-level producer in fantasy football next season, and he's free. He's usually the last quarterback taken in drafts. And so I don't see why you wouldn't do it. I don't see how he wouldn't outperform his ADP. And if he doesn't outperform his ADP, that means it's Taylor Heineke, who's another free option. But I think it's basically a play on like the Geno Smith last year, Jared Goff last year, Tua Tagovailoa last year. These guys who had upgraded weapons that were extremely cheap, but we should have seen it coming because their weapons were so good. It makes the quarterback good as well. And last year, without Kyle Pitts, without Bijan Robinson, with an injured Daryl Patterson, with a worse offensive line, in games that didn't really matter, Desmond Ritter still looked okay. His last 3 games, he averaged 200 passing yards. He finished the season with 224, 2 touchdowns in the final game against the Buccaneers, and didn't throw a single interception as a rookie quarterback. That is very, very rare. And so I think with his profile in the system with Arthur Smith, that he fits it perfectly. He's going to have some rushing upside as well. I would go get myself some Desmond Ritter and just see what happens because he's essentially free and has a ton of upside with the weapons that the Falcons have surrounded him with. Let's go ahead now and move on to wide receivers. And we're going to start things off similar to Kyler Murray. This guy has a value dip, and that is Jamison Williams. I know. He's a knucklehead. He can't catch the ball. Dan Campbell hates him. I don't care. I simply do not care because of the upside that Jamison Williams has. You can sit him on your bench for 6 weeks. You can sit him in your IR in some leagues if they allow suspended players on there. But for the first 6 weeks of the fantasy football season, they don't matter as much as the second half of the fantasy football season. And Jamison Williams could end up being a fantastic producer for you, locked into your lineup week in, week out. At Alabama, he was a mega producer. Before his injury, he was highly regarded as the number 1 wide receiver in last year's draft class, which was a star-studded draft class. He was fantastic again at Alabama last season, 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 2 special teams touchdowns in only 12 games. That is fantastic numbers. And he's only had 1 catch in the NFL. That 1 catch was a 41-yard touchdown. And he even also had a 66-yard touchdown that was called back last season as well. So showing 2 times that he was just too fast and too explosive for defenses to stop him last year on top of his college production. I just don't see why you wouldn't take a chance on the upside that Jamison Williams can and probably will provide, because he fits into this offense so well as well. There's no one with the speed as him. He can stretch the field. Amon-Ra can take the middle. Jahmyr Gibbs can be out of the backfield. And Sam Laporta can do his thing. And it'll be Jamison Williams essentially on the outside running streaks, running these fast little stuff. And I think that Jamison Williams really is going to be fantastic. But again, if this is too rich for your blood, you don't like that type of roster building, then you should be going with Sky Moore, who is going around the same range and has similar upside. We're talking about a guy who could end up being the number 1 wide receiver on his team, and yet he's not being drafted like that. I know he had a disappointing rookie campaign, only had 2 games with 5 receptions, only scored 1 impressive touchdown, which was in the Super Bowl, so that's very cool. But he was outside of the top 100 in points per game last season. But everything we're hearing out of the Chiefs camp this preseason and offseason is that Sky Moore is locked into a bigger role this year, playing every single 2 wide receiver set, is really learning the playbook, working on his chemistry with Patrick Mahomes. And with the Travis Kelce now scare, Sky Moore has the potential to lead his team in targets. If Travis Kelce does go down, he would probably be the guy. And so Sky Moore, I think it's time to go ahead and draft him. He was really, really good at Western Michigan. Again, disappointed. But if you go back to heading into the process, into the NFL, a lot of people were extremely excited about Sky Moore. Get that bad taste out of your mouth and bet on him again. Because if you liked him going into the rookie season, you should like him even more now heading into year 2. Okay, we've talked about wide receivers and we've talked about quarterbacks. Let's talk about running backs. And since we're on Player Profiler, you've got to go with Roshon Johnson. I've got another one too. And these guys basically fall into the same vein. Roshon Johnson and Devon Achain. These are 2 rookie running backs that I think you need to be taking. We'll start with Devon Achain. Devon Achain, track speed, and has finally got his weight up. His ADP was low because he was less than 190 pounds. Reports are now that he's pushing 200. Achain came out and said the only reason he was light is because he was a track athlete as well and needed to stay in weight in college for that. But now he doesn't have those concerns. He's put on an NFL frame, hasn't lost any speed, looked decent this preseason. Jeff Wilson just got put on IR. Devon Achain has a real shot at being a true bell cow and workhorse for the Miami Dolphins, with Raheem Mostert being old and having an injury history, and Devon Achain just being a true young stud. And a lot of the same stuff can be said about Roshon Johnson. He's another guy that has basically the potential to lead the backfield. He has an all-down skill set. He can catch the ball, he can pass block, he can run the ball between the tackles, and he can get outside with his speed, and he's got great size. All of those things are pluses for Roshon Johnson. And with him being better than Deontay Foreman, him having a more well-rounded skill set than Khalil Herbert, it's very, very possible that Roshon Johnson by the end of the year ends up being the RB1. It's going to take some time, but I've seen him not even go drafted in some of these casual leagues, and I don't see why you wouldn't be rostering Roshon Johnson with the upside that he has, especially towards the end of the season. So Roshon Johnson and Devon Achain, 2 rookie running backs with potentials to be workhorse bell cow running backs on their team. Go ahead and draft Achain and Roshon. And finally, the tight end value. I had 2, but then I decided, you know what? We're just going with the 1, and I'm picking Gerald Everett. And there's so many reasons to choose it. Mostly it's because he's on the Chargers, and why wouldn't you want the Chargers tight end? He ended the year strong last season. He had a touchdown in 3 straight games, and in the final game of the year, the playoff loss to the Jaguars, he had 109 yards. He also was extremely efficient. He had 9.3 points per game, which was 11th among tight ends. He was tight end 13 overall, finished with the 8th most receptions, the 11th most yards, the 12th most touchdowns, and was also very solid in some other key metrics. Top 10 in red zone targets, routes run, yards after catch, contested catch rate, and expected points per game. With him being one of the last tight ends taken in drafts, the value cannot get much better. We've seen the health concerns with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Josh Palmer is fine. And with Quentin Johnston looking more and more like a bust, Gerald Everett has a potential to be the number 1 target some weeks this season. And with that price tag on him right now, you 100% need to be drafting Gerald Everett. All right, guys, those are all the values I have for you that I think could help you win your league. Do we have any questions? Any thoughts on Pittman? I think he's fine. My thing with Pittman is I just don't know how the targets are going to be shaking out in Indianapolis. Plus, we still have those accuracy concerns with Anthony Richardson, as well as not knowing how much pass volume will be there to begin with. And so at his ADP, I'm not really taking any chances on Michael Pittman. I think he's an excellent sell high candidate, or at least just a sell candidate, because I think basically he's valued at his ceiling right now, being, kind of right in the middle of like the wide receiver 2 range, maybe a high end wide receiver 2 trade value. You could take him and get some other wide receivers with a higher ceiling, perhaps a lower floor. But I think that you could actually get a really good amount of value for Michael Pittman based on some of the concerns. I think he'll be fine, but I just, at the wide receiver position, there's so much value and upside elsewhere that I would rather sell him. Let's see. Would you take Monty and Cooks for Swift and a 2024 third? Yes, I would 100% do that. I love Brandon Cooks this season. I think he's going to have another 1,000-yarder within him. And David Montgomery should be scoring a ton of touchdowns. I wouldn't be surprised if David Montgomery had the same amount of points as DeAndre Swift. So you're basically talking about a 2024 third for Brandon Cooks, and I would do that every single day of the week. So let's see. Somebody says trade up to Watson from Pittman. Exactly. Do that. Like, trade Pittman for Christian Watson. Easy move that you should be doing. Chances that Isaiah Hodgins is the Giants wide receiver 1 this year. I can't. I don't know. The Giants wide receiver room in general is so tough to predict. Someone says Waller is the Giants wide receiver 1. I'm not buying into that. I think that it's going to be one of these other players. I think it's going to be pretty consolidated, to be completely honest. I think Wan'Dale Robinson's going to have some weeks. I think Isaiah Hodgins is going to have some weeks. Paris Campbell could have some weeks. Jalen Hyatt could turn into something. Darren Waller might have a couple games. The real answer here is Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley are the Giants you want to roster, unless you really do want to take a chance on one of the cheap wide receivers like Isaiah Hodgins, who's basically available everywhere. And John Wright asks, any running backs between 12 to 20 that can finish in the top 10? Are you taking chances on Gabe Davis? I'm not really taking chances on Gabe Davis unless it's best ball. And then running backs that I think can finish top 10 outside of the top 10. The one I've been saying is Najee Harris. If you tune into my video on Monday, I said that I see him finishing RB1 overall. There's a potential for that. So I think Najee Harris would be my answer there, although he's probably a little bit ahead of the RB12 range. But still, I think he's got a great year within him. And then finally, somebody on Instagram asks, any thoughts on Andre Iosivas? I love that Andre Iosivas was the Bengals leading receiver all preseason. I think that means good things. I'm rostering both Andre Iosivas and Charlie Jones in my deeper dynasty leagues. Why not latch on to some Bengals wide receivers, as there is some uncertainty with T. Higgins' future on the team, as well as Tyler Boyd, and of course the tight ends as well. There's real potential for both of those guys going into 2024 to even be the wide receiver 2 and the wide receiver 3 in that offense, which would just be fantastic. They've both got really good profiles behind them and both got a really good landing spot. So Andre Iosivas and Charlie Jones, fun little dart throws to take. And then the last question of today, Greg Dulcich or Sam Laporta week 1? Give me Sam Laporta week 1. I know it's ballsy, but just that Chiefs matchup, you've got to take a gamble there, assuming it's a shootout. We don't really know what the Broncos offense is going to look like with Deshaun Payton. We don't know what Dulcich's usage is going to be with Adam Troutman. So I would just kind of go with Laporta based on matchup. All right, guys, thank you all for tuning in. This was another fantastic episode of the Wake and Take. You can find all the other videos from this week with all of my takes on this season on the Player Profiler YouTube channel under the live tab. I will be live tomorrow on the YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram with Chase Vernon doing a little bit of a preview for the Thursday night football game, as well as getting his hot takes for the 2023 season. I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. You have a great Wednesday, a great rest of your week. Have a good one. Peace.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.